So it's been about 2 weeks since the election, an election where Democrats lost handedly. I mean, they lost bad. You have to royally screw up if you lost the White House, the Senate, and the popular vote to Trump. But one of the things that makes this election sting even more for Democrats, at least for Democrats that are willing to look at things objectively, which they aren't. A Democrat with an honest, objective worldview is somewhat of an oxymoron. But in any event, one of the things that hurts the left more in this election is they lost to a guy who, let's be honest, isn't particularly popular to an extent. There have been multiple polls that showed Trump at 40% favorability, 44% favorability, or whatever, if you take those polls seriously. That's certainly better than Kamala's comically low 29% approval rating she had while she was vice president, before she ran for president and the left magically loved her for some bizarre reason. All of a sudden they went from approaching Dick Cheney levels of disgust among the public to magically having Obama levels of enthusiasm. Right, okay. But I mean, whether you love him or hate him, Trump is not a Reagan-type Republican who is going to win 49 out of 50 states. He's alienated a lot of people, and he was demonized for that, and yet he still won a massive victory. Democrats spent the better part of 4 years, spewing their delusional bullshit. A man can become a woman, kids should be allowed to have gender reassignment surgeries and be put on puberty blockers, telling Americans the economy's great, and their favorite phrase, Bidenomics is working, when the average rent in the U.S. for a 3-bedroom is over $2,000. The list of their insanity and delusion goes on. In any event, my main point is that I've been on Twitter quite a bit since this election was called, and from what I can tell, liberals, Democrats, whatever you want to call them, are shaping up to lose 2028. Because they don't really seem to have learned anything from this loss, at least based on a lot of comments I'm seeing on Twitter, primarily from Democrats. I mean, when someone like Cenk Uygur, or whatever his name is, sounds somewhat reasonable because he's actually able to understand why his party lost and also articulate why they lost, you realize the left dug themselves into a hole. A really bad hole, and they only have themselves to blame. But they can't take responsibility. I mean, I'm seeing liberal Twitter give your sort of generic reasons as to why Kamala lost. She's a woman and men are sexist, so they won't vote for her. She's a minority and something white supremacy bad, so they wouldn't vote for her. God forbid these people grasp the fact that she was just a bad candidate. I mean, she just sucked, no pun intended. People were simply tired of being told the economy was great and you're just not intelligent enough to see how wonderful this economy is. This terrible message didn't sell at all, and I think it's only going to add fuel to their fire, and that fire is they're going to get fucked in 2028 if they keep up this nonsense. And you know, I also see a lot of people online who seem to be telling everyone they're graciously departing Twitter for Blue Sky, or whatever the hell it's called. So again, they're doubling down on just wanting to talk into an echo chamber. In my opinion, if you're a Republican, or you're at least happy Trump won, you should be thrilled about this news because they're just letting the world know that they have no interest in changing their behavior or message. And look, I'm not saying Twitter is the end-all be-all of people's opinions on politics, but I take it somewhat seriously when I see so many liberals on there are just continuing to double down on Trump bad, quote-unquote, and refuse to admit they elected a bad candidate who was attached to the hip to a bad president. Keep in mind, though, I saw Twitter liberals for years say that Biden was doing fantastic cognitively, despite everyone having eyes and ears and being able to see that Biden was barely lucid, let alone a good president. I mean, I saw Twitter light up when Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala. They live in such an echo chamber that they thought another celebrity endorsement was going to bring it home for Harris. These people just, they couldn't read the room. Trump at least was creative enough to take his presidential run to various podcasts, which were watched by tens of millions of people. And forget about how popular the Joe Rogan podcast was for him. The left just couldn't understand that Kamala doing some generic, boring 15-minute interview on mainstream news was not going to sell anymore like it may have back in the 2000s. And look, I didn't make this video just to bash the left, but I did try to analyze why they lost so badly. I think there were many signs that Kamala was going to lose, and it seemed like, at least to me, that many on the left either couldn't read those signs or outright refused to. In any event, unless they change their tune, liberals better gear up to lose 2028, because the country's shifting right politically. Trump increased his votes with more or less every demographic. That's significant, and if you're a liberal, you should be concerned with that. I don't really see the left having any sort of solution to that, at least a solution that they can sell to the public, or at least seem to at least be interested in trying to sell to the public. And look, I'm just a person with an opinion. I'm not a political strategist or a professional pollster. But even a monkey could have seen the writing on the wall with this. I mean, personally, I just enjoy analyzing things, and I try to strategize things, and I enjoy politics overall in general. And look, I'm not pretending I don't have any sort of bias. I mean, I am human, and I'm sure my own bias is an effect of my opinions. But I try to sort of mitigate that. I looked at this election from the point of someone on the left and sort of said to myself, how could Kamala have won? I mean, that's what you should do if you lost. You take a step back, look at what you did wrong, and reassess. But liberals are just not doing that. And look, if they were, I would say, okay, they seem to have learned from this loss and they're reorganizing. But they're not doing that. I mean, granted, it's only been 2 weeks, give or take, since Trump won, but I don't see any real signs that these people who voted for Harris are realizing that Americans just were not buying what they were selling. To them, everyone who didn't understand why Harris was better was just wrong. And you're just not smart enough to understand. That's what I mean when I say they don't seem to have learned from this loss. And, I think the main takeaway, and again, this is just my opinion, and I'm not pretending that I'm some sort of political genius, but my main takeaway post-election is that the overall vibe from Democrats is that they're too self-absorbed, and many of them live in their ivory tower. So anyone who disagrees with them couldn't possibly be right or possibly have some good points. The Democrats' overall vibe over the last 4 years has been to talk down to everyone they disagree with. One of the interesting things about arrogant people is their arrogance usually doesn't allow them to see how arrogant they are. So I wouldn't be surprised if this energy that Democrats have will result in them losing more elections down the road. Obviously, I can't see into the future, but there's no way to say in good conscience that Kamala Harris ran a good campaign. Yet I still see so many liberals, primarily on Twitter, saying Kamala's campaign was fantastic. The campaign of happiness and joy, as they put it. I mean, Joy Reid of MSNBC said that Kamala ran a flawless campaign. This is what I'm talking about, and when I say the left learned nothing from this loss. I mean, Kamala ran a flawless campaign? Really? Do they really honestly believe that? And my honest opinion is yes, many of them do believe that. And sure, look, I'm sure there are some people on the left who are able to see why she lost. Again, I go back to Cenk Uygur and maybe some others. But from what I can tell, they're taking this loss and they're just basically saying, well, democracy is dead because Trump won. And they're acting as if we didn't already have 4 years of a Trump presidency and democracy didn't die. And, to be fair to Kamala, I think she somewhat did distance herself from the insane woke left. She didn't run a major campaign on saying her detractors were racist, and she didn't run a hardcore pro-transgender campaign. But I think the issue that she didn't recognize, and many on the left didn't recognize, was that although she didn't hardcore support those things during her 100-day campaign, she wasn't able to effectively show the country that she no longer held those views. I mean, she had to distance herself from her own views that she just held 5 or 6 years ago. I don't see this wave of Democrats who are acknowledging that that was a bad strategy. They're sort of sheepishly saying, well, yeah, she lost, we need to come back stronger, but they're only saying that because they have no choice. I'm sure you could really do a deep dive into why Kamala lost so horribly, but my point isn't exactly with her loss, it's more with how her supporters and people on the left in general are reacting to her loss. Another example of how the left can't take agency over bad political moves was when Kamala was caught on a hot mic, basically saying she's losing support among males. Instead of liberals accepting that what Kamala said was true, they decided to play the world's smallest violin for men and basically say, oh, poor men aren't getting attention anymore, poor you. Men are just afraid of supporting a strong woman, so on and so forth. I mean, this was another stupid strategy because you're demonizing or at the very least talking down to a group of people who you need to win. I guess it sort of makes sense that they would act this way because this was the same group of people who proudly and not sarcastically said, white dudes for Harris. I mean, how does the left still not understand that that strategy was nothing short of a joke It only made men outside of men who were already Harris voters feel like they were just being made fun of. Or when that woman at a Harris rally said, we're going to win, na 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 na, and was just kind of acting very arrogant and acting like she just knew that she was going to win and everybody else was wrong. I mean, these people seem to be unable to look back at themselves and understand that aside from having unpopular policies, their tone and attitude hurt them, and I honestly think it hurt them more than we realize. Anyway, I know all of what I said was my opinion, but nobody can deny that the country's shifting Republican. The Democrats are either too pig-headed or delusional to recognize that they ran a terrible elitist vibes type campaign that didn't speak to the working class, with a terrible candidate who routinely gave word salad answers to basic questions on softball interviews. I mean, she flubbed a softball interview and looked ridiculous, and liberal answers to that was, well, look at how terrible Trump is. There's probably a million of other reasons I could discuss as to why Harris lost and how her supporters refused to recognize that they never had a chance from the start. But, I figured I'd just kind of end it with this. I have yet to see any significant shift on the left that indicates they want to change their message and delivery and try to distance themselves from strategies that clearly did not work. If anything, like I said earlier, they seem to want to just bury their head in the sand as to why they lost so badly.